Welcome back. Now the latest out of Ukraine. Russian troops battering Ukraine with a massive overnight assault. The Kremlin now taking control of the city of Kherson. This is the first Ukrainian city to fall since the invasion began. And you will see Russian soldiers and tanks patrolling the streets there in Kherson. Russia and Ukraine readying another round of talks in a few hours, while Russia's foreign minister says attacks will continue even during the negotiations that we are expecting to happen very soon. Joining me right now is Florida Senator Marco Rubio. He is vice chairman of the Intel Committee and a member of the Appropriations and Foreign Relations Committees. Senator, thanks so much for being here this morning. I know you've had legislation and have been talking about making sure to take some of these Russian companies and even Chinese companies out of access for regular Americans. But first, I want to get your take on the events of the last day. Now we see these tanks rolling through Kherson. Can the free world do anything more to stop Vladimir Putin at this point?
Well, I think the free world is doing a lot more than I thought it was going to do. I'm actually pleasantly surprised at the rallying we've seen all throughout Europe, and other countries now have joined, Korea, Japan, in imposing these crippling sanctions. The Russian economy is in total free fall. And I would tell you, I would expect the unexpected inside of Russia. I mean, these things move very quickly. We're never going to see it coming if something's happening internally, but they're going to be in a really, really difficult place a week from now. If you look at the impact this is having on their economy, there are all kinds of CEOs are abandoning the country. Virtually everyone who can get out, meaning, you know, whether it's a CEO or worker, everyone who can get out of Russia is getting out right now. And the combination of that brain drain and the capital that they're taking with them, I don't know if you saw, Putin is banning anyone leaving with more than $10,000. The impact on their economy is devastating. So that's going to begin to have an impact here. But because, as we well know in this country, these kinds of wars, like what he's doing now, it costs money, and he's not going to be able to afford it.
It is just so eerie to see these tanks rolling through Kherson. It feels like Europe in 1940, Senator, and I know that you've pointed out many times that Americans have money tied up in the Russian markets, often without their knowledge. You want to put an end to it. You've spoken about this a lot for a long time, even as it relates to China. And I know that the Russia indices, I saw this just yesterday, that the FG 100 is actually removing the Russian indices, Russia to be deleted from all FG Russell equity indices. What more can be done, Senator?
Well, that's a good sign that the market's taken. I mean, we need to bring some legal structure around it. My bill basically prevents that investment from happening. Look, I've been focused on China in that regard. I think that's the real long-term problem for this country, okay? China is Russia times 1,000. Their economy's way bigger. Their military might is superior at this point. Their influence over here, I mean, let's not forget, okay, there are American companies and their CEOs who are basically lobbyists for the Chinese government's position on a range of issues because they're desperate for market share over there and because they've got their factories and their production over there. But Russia is also a threat, especially with this free fall in their economy and the lack of transparency and the like. And you got a lot of Americans who every month or every paycheck put a little bit aside in some retirement fund that they do not control, and it's invested in very risky things in Russia, and they're going to see themselves deeply impacted by it. And so my bill would just make that permanent at this point. I don't think good economic days are ahead for Russia anytime soon, and there's just a lot of volatility over there right now.
But as you mentioned, Xi Jinping is watching this closely. And remember, these Chinese companies that trade on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, they have not been following our auditing rules for a long time. I know there are new rules in place that they have to show us their books and they have to explain whether or not they're getting subsidized by the CCP. But there's a 3-year period. So, I mean, is there anything more that this administration needs to do, that Congress can do, to make sure people are aware that they're investing in companies, and ultimately that means they are funding the expansion of these adversaries?
Yeah, so if I, as an American, controlled a publicly traded company, there's all kinds of things I would have to disclose to my shareholders every year because you want people not to lose their money and get scammed. But Chinese companies don't have to do that, and they should be required to do it immediately or they can't be listed here. because of the exposure. And you talk about Xi Jinping, I think there's a couple things he's doing right now. And then I think he's also got something we need to call him out on. He loves to go around the world talking about China is for non-interference. I mean, invading another country is a strong interference. They should be condemning it. He spends a lot of time worried about separatists in Tibet. You know, he argues Taiwan is a part of China and they're a separatist. And yet he's supporting Vladimir Putin's effort to create separatists in Ukraine and to balkanize that country. But my guess is Xi Jinping and the Communist Party of China is working on, can they create a broadly accepted alternative to that SWIFT banking system? Because if they can create something like that and make it available to Russia and other sanctioned countries, that would be a big move for them in terms of replacing the U.S.-led international global order that they so desperately want to overthrow and replace. So I'd keep an eye on that. And I also think they're watching to see what happens to Russia after invading Ukraine, because whatever happens to them is a kind of an indicator of what they might face the day they try to move on Taiwan.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned who voted in favor and who voted against. Look at that UN vote this week.
Yeah.
141 in favor of holding Russia to account, 5 against, and 34 countries abstention, including Iran and China and others. President Trump joined me yesterday on this program, Senator, and he gave us his prediction of when he expects China to invade Taiwan. Listen to this. President Trump, do you expect China to invade Taiwan sooner rather than later?
I do, because they're seeing how stupid the United States is run. They're seeing that our leaders are incompetent, and of course they're going to do. This is their time.
Senator, what about that? I mean, can we even calculate what Xi Jinping is thinking in terms of his next move?
Well, I don't know if we can predict it exactly, but I think a couple things I'm pretty comfortable saying. The first is, before the end of this decade, China is going to, we won't reach the end of this decade without China making some move. They're planning their new Communist Party Congress here fairly soon, and there's rumors they're going to be announcing some new Taiwan policy. My sense is that the Chinese would prefer for Taiwan to just surrender, to kind of look at the world and say, look, if Putin was able to take Ukraine and the world couldn't stop him, there's no way they'll be able to stop China, which is much more powerful. So we might as well negotiate the terms under which we go under the Chinese government's authority. That's, I think, Xi Jinping's preference. But one of the things we need to do, and we're learning this in Ukraine, is we need to, the more capable Taiwan is at making it expensive and painful for China to move against them militarily, the less likely China is to do it, the further out into the future it pushes that. And that's really what I hope the Taiwanese will focus on, and what we should be helping them focus on. They need to become a porcupine, which is, you know, it's painful to eat it, painful to swallow it, and painful to digest it. And that's what we need to make. We need to continue to raise the pain threshold, and the Taiwanese really need to focus on that as part of their defense strategy.
Senator, let me take you back to domestic issues. Of course, President Biden giving his first State of the Union address on Tuesday. Your reaction to that address?
Yeah, I don't think he was honest with the American people. He talks about 6.5 million jobs that were created. He forgot we've lost 9.5 million, so there's 3 million jobs that are still not filled. He didn't talk about there's a worker shortage out there, 11 million jobs unfilled. Over half the employers in this country say they can't find workers. He bragged about how much more people are making. They are. Paychecks have gone up because it's harder to find workers, but what he didn't tell them is everything costs more. So it's eating up your paycheck. It's wiping it out. He wasn't honest about his plans. Every one of the plans that he's proposed here: increase the debt, increase the deficit, increase government, basically in some ways codify socialism, and wouldn't solve any of the problems. In fact, it would make it worse. If you look at America today, everything in America today is worse off than it was in January of 2021 when he was sworn in. Everything. The economy, employment, everything is worse. Not better, worse.
And yet, Senator, the president is still pushing through some portions of Build Back Better. He claims that inflation gets better when you agree to his spending.
Well, I don't know how, not just his spending, but his government restrictions. Look what he's done in energy. Okay, today, on this very day, and tomorrow and the day before, the United States will buy 600,000 barrels of oil from Vladimir Putin, who's a butcher. We could easily replace that with just a 50% increase in the shortfall that now exists in American oil production. He won't do it. We need to ban that and replace it. All that Green New Energy, all that Green New Deal scam that he's pushed on the American people, what it has done to American energy prices is horrendous. It's horrifying. Today we are producing $1.2 million of oil, 1.2 million barrels of oil less than we were back in 2019 and early 2020. We've got the energy in this country, but it's raised the cost of living on everybody, because when fuel prices go up, the price of everything goes up, because everything we buy has to be transported by something that burns that fuel.
And the price of energy is up today. We're talking about oil at 113, crude, and Brent at 115. Energy and the climate agenda, Senator, especially the green agenda, is the priority in all sectors here. Look what they're trying to do in terms of the overseer of banks. Will Sarah Bloom Raskin get through? Real quick, is she going to pass the Senate?
I don't know, but she shouldn't. And just to remind everybody, another point, he said that in the State of the Union, give me my Fed nominees. Well, let me tell you, the Fed nominee he has is someone who has said that she doesn't think that banks should be offering accounts or doing business with the fossil fuel industry. I have nothing against solar panels and wind and all that stuff, but you can't power a 21st century economy with today's technology using those things. We need natural gas. We need oil. God has blessed America with it, so let's use it.
Senator, we'll see. We'll see if any of this bad policy changes. It's certainly resulted in bad outcomes. Senator Marco Rubio, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you
for joining us this morning. Senator in D.C. Quick break, and then more than 1 million people